a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I drink coffee. A lot of coffee. I'm surprised my skin isn't getting darker. There's blood in my coffee system. If I were to take a blood test, it would come out highly caffeinated. I have drunk some coffee that should have been dumped out, but I like coffee, even the bad stuff. I didn't always drink coffee. But that's another story. If you like coffee and you only want the best in the universe, go to 4501 McPherson, the Organic Man Coffee Trike, home of coffee so good it's impossible to describe. For those of you living in other parts of the world, you can get the best coffee in the universe by going to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Coffee makes life gooder. I get ideas. In school, I was told not to get any ideas. No, these are ideas that just come to me from I'm not too sure where. Every once in a while, somebody will suggest that maybe I should do a show about something. Other times, I'll watch something on TV or I'll be reading a book and I'll think I need to expand on that idea. Then there are these weird ideas that just kind of jump into my head. I get visited by a muse. No, these are not aliens sneaking into my bedroom in the middle of the night trying to kidnap me. A muse in ancient Greek and Roman legend was one of 9 goddesses who gave encouragement in different areas of literature, art, and music. A muse could be a person, being, or a force that gives us someone ideas and helps them to write, paint, or create music. Late at night, when I can't sleep, sometimes I wonder, why did it take so long for the folks on Gilligan's Island to get back home? I also wonder, why did the Howells pack so much luggage for a 3-hour cruise? On occasion, I just might contemplate the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. On a very few occasions, I get stuck thinking about something that leads me to turn into a show. I got this idea, and it stayed with me even when I woke up the next morning. I figure there are folks out there who are hurting. Not hurting physically, but emotionally and mentally. They need to do something about their lives, but a lot of them don't know what to do. Now, some of y'all might make it this far in the show and decide you want to listen to something else. Be my guest. I don't understand why some people bother listening to me. I do the show the way I want, and if others agree, that's great. I'm amazed by some of the folks out there who feel it is their duty to inform me of each and everything that I say that they disagree with. When did people come to the realization that their opinions were so devastatingly important and anyone who thought differently was their enemy? This either comes from too much fluoride, maybe it's those chemtrails that are doing it, or they were brainwashed by going to colleges and universities. Anytime there are several hosts in a show, and they're going to go in separate directions to do their investigations, one of them will say, "Divide and conquer," as if they know what they're saying. That's not what that expression means. To divide and conquer, the opposing force slips some of their minions into another country who go around sowing discontent among the locals. They convince some of these yahoos that anyone who disagrees with them is their enemy. Anyone who is in the same country, that is. These antagonists work to divide the country. So instead of fighting to save their country, they wind up fighting each other. As the Roman army was marching on Jerusalem, there were people inside the wall trying to instill their ideas on the locals. These folks were Jewish, but they thought that half the people inside the wall weren't Jewish enough. To instill a sense of oneness, they set fire to the food stores. Jerusalem could have survived for years if their food supply hadn't been destroyed. Divide and conquer means to get the locals to fight each other so the invaders didn't have to fight everyone. If you don't like the show, what are you doing still listening? Someone, somewhere out there, might be hurting. Not physically, but deep inside their brain. They have become a prisoner, a slave to alcohol. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. There's a saying, the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the man. I hope this show works its way into the mind of someone who needs to hear it, and it helps. As for everyone else, listen and learn. It may make you a better person. Well, maybe a more knowledgeable person. If nothing else, you'll know a little something about some people in our lives. Alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. To most people, that makes no sense. I've seen folks who have decided that their lives did become unmanageable. I'm watching my cat trying to steal my microphone. Their lives had become unmanageable, and they tried to turn their will over to a higher power. Someone or something with more power that could help them in their battle. Once again, this might not make sense to some of y'all. A lot of alcoholics have become agnostic. They may have grown up in a religious or a spiritual home only to lose their beliefs once the demon rum got its hooks in them. To get around the difficulty that some folks had with God, the folks who knew things changed the wording from God to a higher power. Let's face it, God is a higher power, just by a different name. Religion gets all confused when dealing with alcoholics because it is cunning, baffling, and powerful. Man, it sounds like I'm talking about a creature instead of ETOH. Ethyl alcohol, often referred to as ethanol, is the active ingredient in alcoholic drinks. ETOH abuse is the condition in which a person continues to drink excessively despite the harmful effects it has on their social, mental, physical, and emotional health. ETOH abuse is often referred to as alcohol abuse. Two men, Bill and Bob, were standing on a corner when a funeral procession began to drive by. Bill asked Bob who the funeral was for. Bob said, "Oh, that's John Johnson. He drank himself to death." Bill said, "He should have gone to AA." Bob said, "Oh, no, he wasn't that bad." That, unfortunately, is a concept a lot of people have when dealing with alcoholics. Families have striven for answers for as far back as alcohol has been consumed. There's always that one family member who, once he or she begins to drink, becomes a monster. The nicest guy in the world becomes a nasty, horrible, inconsiderate fool as soon as the booze passes their lips. The best example of this is the movie Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The good doctor, looking to make life better, consumes a substance that he had invented that turned him into a beast. All that tinkering around in the lab when all he really needed to do was visit the local liquor store. In ancient times, addiction was seen as a moral failing or the consequences of spiritual imbalance. Many cultures attributed addiction to supernatural forces or divine punishment. Ancient Egyptians believed addiction was caused by the interference of evil spirits and treated it through rituals and ceremonies. Ancient Greeks associated addiction with the displeasure of the gods, and they sought divine intervention for its resolution. In the 17 and the 1800s, alcoholic mutual aid societies and sobriety circles provided early recovery and help. These groups were originally comprised of various Indian tribes, a feather, not dot, and some evolved into abstinence based Native American revival movements. Native Americans used native healing practices to treat their alcoholism. 1784, Benjamin Rush argued that alcoholism was a disease that should be treated as such. Rush was a physician committed to educating the public about the hazards of alcohol. Excessive use of alcohol in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was a major health problem. His written works helped to launch the beginnings of the temperance movement. Now, this is just my opinion, but the temperance movement was a bunch of busybodies who wanted to tell drinkers everything they were doing wrong without giving them any help. 1850, lodging homes and homes for the fallen, also known as inebriate homes, began to pop up here and there. These homes provided short voluntary stays that included non medical detoxification, isolation from the drinking culture, moral reframing, and immersion in newly formed sobriety fellowships. The first inebriate homes opened in Boston in 1850 and were modeled after state operated insane asylums. New York State Inebriate Asylum opened in 1864. It was the first medically monitored addiction treatment center in the U.S., and it is considered the first alcohol rehab center. To get into a place like this, you had to either have money or get put there by the courts. For the folks living from paycheck to paycheck, this wasn't necessarily for them. Healy Alcoholism Cures began in 1870. Founded by Dr. Leslie Keeley, more than 120 Keeley Institutes opened in North America and Europe. These consisted of addiction cure institutes and proprietary home cures. Freud recommended cocaine to treat alcoholism and morphine addiction. Sigmund Freud began using cocaine himself, calling it the magical drug. American physicians, American physicians used cocaine to treat alcoholism and morphine addiction. Trade one addiction for another. As time marched on, many inebriate homes and asylums began to close, which led to alcoholics being sent to drunk tanks, wards, and foul wards in hospitals. In the 1800s, if you contracted a venereal disease, you were sent to a foul ward for treatment. Poorly evaluated clinical therapies, ethical abuse, economic depression, stigma, demedicalization, and criminalization of alcohol and drug problems led to the shuttering of inebriate homes. The Emmanuel Clinic opened in 1906 in Boston. This was a church-based form of psychotherapy to heal addictions with a combination of spirituality and psychological intervention. The Emmanuel movement's groundwork was instrumental in the establishment of Alcoholics Anonymous. In 1910, things got very weird in some states. Laws were passed that called for the sterilization of the mentally ill, developmentally disabled, and alcoholics and addicts. You drank too much, snip, snip. Legislation granted the medical supervisors of asylums and prisons the authority to asexualize a patient or inmate if such action would improve his or her physical, mental, or moral conditions. I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't laugh about that, but to me, it's weird. The first federal narcotics farm opened in Lexington, Kentucky in 1935. This was a center for drug treatment as well as federal research. It provided free treatment to addicts and alcoholics, which included the Lexington Cure. This narco farm was in reality a prison where research on human subjects could be conducted. Once again, somebody who thought they had all the answers didn't even know what the question was. The major problem all these cures had was they were all being treated from the outside. People who thought they knew what was best because they read a book somewhere tried to push their ideas onto the drunks. Alcoholics Anonymous was formed in 1935. The four founding members were Bill Wilson, E.B. Thatcher, E.B. Thatcher. My cats are entertaining me to the side here, and I'm trying not to pay attention to them. Roland Hazard and Dr. Bob Smith. They were highly influenced by the Emmanuel movement. Bill W. and Dr. Bob were both alcoholics who realized that they were unable to achieve sustained abstinence despite their Christian faith. They sat down and talked about what needed to be done. It was determined an alcoholic needed the support of people who knew exactly what they were going through. No theories from folks who read a book about how things should be done. No people getting involved who saw alcoholism and its cure as a way to make money. Alcoholics helping other alcoholics. William Griffith Wilson was born November 26, 1895, in East Dorset, Vermont. He was born in his parents' home and business, the Mount Aeolus Inn and Tavern. Yes, he was born in a bar. His grandfather, William C. Wilson, was an alcoholic. In an effort to stop ruining his life, his grandfather climbed the top of Mount Aeolus, where he had a spiritual experience and was able to quit drinking. Well, stop drinking. How could this be? Did God reach down and touch his heart or his brain, causing him to change his ways? Things happen in our world that no one can explain. It kind of drives the boys in the white lab coats nuts. Bill's father left for Canada in 1905, and his mother left soon after to study osteopathic medicine in Massachusetts. Bill and his sister were abandoned by their parents, so they wound up being raised by their maternal grandparents, Fayette and Ella Griffith. 1908, Bill met Mark Whalen, who was 9 years older than him. Whalen became Bill's closest childhood friend, becoming more of a father figure. Whalen continued to be a confidant, counselor, and emotional support for Bill throughout his life. He met Lois Burnham during the summer of 1913 while sailing on Vermont's Emerald Lake. 1915, the couple got engaged. Bill entered the Norwich University, but depression and panic attacks forced him to leave during his second semester. The next year he returned, but he was soon suspended along with most of his classmates after a hazing incident. Nobody would take responsibility or drop a dime on the people responsible for this activity, and so the whole class got punished. 1916, Pancho Villa invaded the U.S. Along with his class, Bill was mobilized into the Vermont National Guard. Being a born leader, Bill soon got promoted to lieutenant in the artillery. Not all alcoholics start out drinking. Some are introduced to alcohol by folks who don't seem to have a problem with it. During military training in Massachusetts, young officers were often invited to dinner with the locals. Bill took his first drink, a glass of beer, which had little effect. A few weeks later, he was at another dinner party where he drank something a lot stronger and a lot more plentiful. He began to feel at ease with the guests. He was liberated from his awkward shyness. Bill wrote, "I had found the elixir of life. Even that first evening I got thoroughly drunk, and within a short time I passed out completely. As everyone drank hard, not too much was made of that." The military is a great place if you're drunk. Everybody seems to drink. Bill married Lois on January 24th, 1918, just before shipping out to serve in the Great War, the war to end all wars. Bill was a second lieutenant in the Coastal Artillery. His unit arrived in France ready to join the fighting. Within a few months, the war was over. Despite his fears, Bill had survived, and he was now anxious to get back home and get on with his life. He returned to the U.S., and he and his wife moved to New York. Bill had gone to school to become a lawyer, but he failed to graduate because he was too drunk to pick up his diploma. To put food on the table, Bill became a stock speculator, and he had success traveling the country along with his wife. He would evaluate companies for potential investors and then send his recommendations back to New York. Lois traveled with Bill because she wanted to keep an eye on him. She was hoping that these trips would somehow get her husband to slow down, if not quit drinking. Bill's constant drinking made business near impossible, and it began to ruin his reputation. 1933, Bill was committed to the Charles B. Towns Hospital for drug and alcohol addiction in New York City 4 times, each time under the care of William Duncan Silkworth. Silkworth's theory was that alcoholism was a matter of both physical and mental control. He thought the craving for alcohol was the manifestation of a physical allergy. The physical inability to stop drinking once started was a physical and psychological ailment. Bill gained hope from Silkworth's assertion that alcoholism was a medical condition, but even that knowledge did not help him stay sober. Bill eventually said he would either die from his alcoholism or they were going to have to lock him up because he was beginning to develop Wernicke encephalopathy. You might know this as a wet brain. I watched a medical examiner remove a brain from an inhalant abuser. The brain was hard like a rock. The cells had crystallized. He then removed a brain from an alcoholic, a wet brain. He had to hold it in both hands because it was oozing between his fingers like a handful of jello. Another weird thing about alcohol is if someone manages to stop drinking for 20 years, if God forbid they should start drinking again, they don't start out with 20 years of recovery. The drunk will go right back to where he would have been had he not stopped at all, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Try to explain that one in a lab. Cunning, baffling, and powerful. November 1934, Bill was visited by an old drinking buddy of his, E.B. Thatcher. Edwin Throckmorton Thatcher. Is anybody out there named Throckmorton anymore? He was an old drinking friend and later became the sponsor to Bill. A sponsor in AA is a senior member who has been in recovery for at least a year. They help new members navigate membership, they answer questions, and they work on the 12 steps with them. Sponsors are confidants who understand where the new guy has been and where he wants to be. They are not assigned, they're chosen. EB is credited with introducing Bill to the initial principles that AA would soon develop, such as one alcoholic talking to another. This is a weird concept. It makes little sense. Drunks can go talk to their priest and keep on drinking. They can go see a psychologist and keep drinking. One drunk talking to another drunk for some odd reason works. Most alcoholics I know still refer to themselves as being a drunk. The disease never goes away. There is no cure, only recovery. Bill was astonished when Thatcher told him that he had been sober for weeks under the guidance of the Evangelical Christian Oxford group. Bill took some interest in the group, but shortly after Thatcher's visit, he was again once more back in the hospital after getting drunk. This was his fourth but his last stay at Towns under Silkworth's care. Bill was now beginning to exhibit DTs, or delirium tremens. DTs is the most severe form of alcoholic withdrawal. This condition can sometimes be life-threatening. DTs are possible when someone with long-term alcohol abuse suddenly stops drinking. Long-term heavy alcohol use sets up a tug-of-war effect in your body. Alcohol is on one side slowing down central nervous system activity. Your central nervous system controls your body's automatic processes like breathing and heart rate. Alcohol is a depressant, so it slows down this activity. Your central nervous system is on the other side of the rope, pulling back by increasing its own activity in order to keep things running. Over time, your central nervous system adjusts and sees that increased activity level is now the new norm. If you suddenly stop drinking, it's like the alcohol side lets go of the rope. Suddenly, your central nervous system doesn't have to pull back against alcohol to keep the activity at the proper level. Your central nervous system can't bring its activity level down quickly. That means your central nervous system is much more active than needed, to the point that it negatively affects your automatic body processes. One weird side effect of stopping drinking is called whiskey spiders. People feel bugs crawling all over their bodies. It is probably the nervous system waking back up. Back when I was a young medic, it was considered standard operating procedure to give an alcoholic booze while driving them to the recovery center. This was sometimes necessary just to keep them alive. Nowadays, paramedics have other drugs that they can use. On his fourth attempt at recovery, Bill had a white light spiritual experience, and that's how he managed to stop drinking. Thatcher had visited and tried to persuade Bill to turn himself over to the care of a Christian deity who would liberate him from alcohol. According to Bill, while he was lying in bed, depressed and despairing, he cried out, "I will do anything, anything at all. If there be a God, let him show himself." He then had a sensation of a bright light, a feeling of ecstasy, a new serenity. He never took another drink for the rest of his life. Bill described his experience to Silkworth, who told him, "Something has happened to you I don't understand. You had better hang on to it." Bill joined the Oxford group and he tried to help other alcoholics. They didn't all seem to get sober, but Bill kept sober himself. During a failed business trip to Akron, Ohio, Bill was tempted to drink again, and he decided that in order to remain sober, he needed to help some alcoholics. He called phone numbers in a church directory and eventually secured an introduction to Dr. Bob Smith, an alcoholic Oxford group member. Bill explained Silkworth's theory that alcoholics suffered from physical allergy and a mental obsession. He told Dr. Bob the only way he was able to stay sober was through having a spiritual experience. Dr. Bob was familiar with the tenets of the Oxford group, and upon hearing of Bill's experience, he began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness that he had never before been able to find. My mustache is tickling my nose. After a brief relapse, Dr. Bob was able to stop drinking and stay sober. It was still recovery, not cure. Bill and Dr. Bob began working with other alcoholics. After that summer in Akron, Bill returned to New York where he began having success helping alcoholics in what they called themselves a nameless squad of drunks. I like that name. A nameless squad of drunks. In 1938, after about 100 alcoholics in Akron and New York had managed to stay sober, the fellowship decided to promote its program of recovery through the publication of a book, for which Bill was chosen as the primary author. The book was given the title Alcoholics Anonymous and included the list of suggested activities for spiritual growth known as the 12 Steps. Members called it the Big Book. It was big because it was printed in such a way that made it a lot bigger than it had to be. Lots of spaces and empty areas around the edges. They wanted the book to look like it was packed full of knowledge, kind of like the Bible, so that people picking it up would be expecting to receive a whole lot of extra information. It was kind of a trick to get people to read it, and it seems to have worked. The movement itself took on the name from the book. Bill incorporated the principles of 9 of the 12 traditions, a set of spiritual guidelines to ensure the survival of individual AA groups, in his foreword to the original edition. Later, Tradition 1, 2, and 10 were specified when all 12 traditions were published. The AA General Service Conference in 1955 was a landmark event for Bill in which he turned over the leadership of the maturing organization to an elected board. 1939, Bill and Marty Mann visited High Watch Farm in Kent, Connecticut. Looked like Kentucky, my glasses. It looked like Kentucky. Kent, Connecticut. They would go on to found what is now the High Watch Recovery Center, the world's first alcohol and addiction recovery center, founded on the 12-step principles. Marty was born in Chicago, October 15th, 1904, in an upper middle class family as the offspring of William and Lillian Mann. She attended private schools and traveled extensively. She was a debutante. Marty's father was a top executive at the most prestigious department store in downtown Chicago who drank himself to death. He died of alcoholism. Marty liked women. This was a bit of a problem because, well, this was really frowned on. In fact, it was illegal back then. Being gay was one thing. Being a gay alcoholic was just too much. A double whammy, if you were. Two black marks against her. Her alcoholism escalated and she spent 6 months in a London hospital after her second suicide attempt. She was encouraged to return home to America, probably by the authorities, and her friends. Get the heck out of our country. In 1936, she returned to her family in the United States and sought help from doctors. She quickly became a charity patient at Bellevue Hospital in New York City. She eventually transferred to the Blythewood Sanitarium in Greenwich, Connecticut. 1939, her psychiatrist, Dr. Harry Tiebout, gave her a pre-publication manuscript of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. and persuaded her to attend her first meeting. This meeting took place at Lois and Bill W.'s home. In 1945, Marty became inspired with a desire to eliminate the stigma and ignorance regarding alcoholism and to encourage the disease model, which viewed as a medical and psychological problem, not moral failings. She helped start the Yale School of Alcohol Studies and organized the National Committee for Education on Alcoholism. Bill said AA and any group associated with them should have no political attachments and should never show any preference for any political group. In 1946, he wrote, "No AA group or member should ever, in such a way as to implicate AA, express any opinion on outside controversial issues, particularly those of politics, alcohol reform, or sectarian religion. The Alcoholics Anonymous group oppose no one. Concerning such matters, they can express no views whatsoever." Now, this is now tradition number 10 in AA. Yes, there are 12 traditions as well as steps. During the last years of his life, Bill rarely attended AA meetings because he wanted to avoid being asked to speak as the co-founder rather than as an alcoholic. He was a heavy smoker. Bill eventually suffered from emphysema and pneumonia. He continued to smoke while on oxygen tank in the late 60s. I've seen people do this. They'll be sitting there with an oxygen mask off. They'll pull it off, take a puff, and put the mask back on. I've seen people stick a cigarette in their stoma, the opening in their trachea, and smoke that way. Bill managed to stay in recovery for 36 years. I'll bet a few of you are wondering about that statement, recovery, and not simply saying he quit. You are always an alcoholic, day and night, from the first time you. That thing about the stoma is getting to me. You are always an alcoholic, day and night, from the first time you pick up a desire chip until you take your last breath. Yuck. Or your next drink. I see some folks now have keychains instead of chips. If you ever visited the VA back in back when it was a lot nastier than it is now, you'd see a lot of soldiers with a cigarette stuck in a stoma opening. Yuck. As with any celebrity, there are folks out there who will try to say bad things about Bill. They accuse him of running around with ladies of negotiable affections. There were rumors of extramarital affairs. All of these accusations came out after Bill was dead and unable to refute them. Historian Ernest Kurtz did some research, and he said all of these nasty things that said about Bill could be traced back to one man. Tom Powers had been Bill's friend for a few years until something got between them. In the 1950s, Tom Powers joined Alcoholics Anonymous, where he, like many others, found refuge from the wreckage of addiction. Powers was an atheist when he joined, and he had a lot of trouble with anything like a higher power or God being needed for his recovery. He was skeptical of spiritual underpinnings that the 12-step program promoted. Despite his reservations, he respected Bill's vision of the recovery program that emphasized spiritual awakening as the key to overcoming alcoholism. Powers initially approached his recovery focusing on psychological aspects rather than spiritual components. Power began to see how recovery was related to a higher power, which led to his increased belief in God. With time, this belief kind of turned into a form of fanaticism. He went from one extreme to the other. Increasingly uncomfortable with the looseness of AA's spiritual framework and the reliance on personal interpretation of a higher power, Powers began to distance himself from Bill's more fluid vision of recovery. In his view, true recovery demanded rigorous adherence to a more structured and dogmatic spiritual path. This shift culminated in his decision to leave AA and form AAA. No, not the American Automotive Association, the other one, All Addicts Anonymous, also known as AAA. 1958, a program that went beyond AA in its spiritual demands. AAA addressed not only alcoholism, but all forms of addiction, requiring participants engage in strict self examination, personal accountability, and a deeply traditional spiritual journey. AAA went back to the earliest roots of AA and the Oxford group and embraced not only the 12 steps, but also encouraged practicing the four absolutes. The four absolutes are honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Powers had moved from atheist to an uncompromising belief in the necessity of higher spiritual authority as the only path to lasting recovery. His retreat center in East Ridge, New York, became the embodiment of this philosophy. At East Ridge, those seeking recovery were expected to fully immerse themselves in a spiritual, rigorous environment, free from the distractions of compromises that Powers felt had seeped into AA. His vision of recovery was no longer about just staying sober. It was about spiritual discipline and transformation achieved through unwavering commitment to traditional dogma. Not everything that went on in Bill's recovery was fantastic or admirable. Things were done that at the time were considered to be okay. Kind of like how smoking used to be good for you. Better living through chemical dependency. In the 1950s, Bill used LSD in a medically supervised experiment run by Betty Eisner, Gerald Heard, and Aldous Huxley. Taking LSD for the first time August 29th, 1956. It was legal at the time. With Bill's invitation, his wife Lois and Neil Wing also participated in such experiments. Now, try to not picture Bill W. wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt with a headband around his head and long hair. You can't get it out of your mind, can you? Later, Bill wrote to Carl Jung praising the results and recommending it as a validation of Jung's spiritual experience. According to Bill, the session allowed him to re-experience a spontaneous spiritual experience that he'd had years before, which he had said enabled him to handle his alcoholism. Bill was enthusiastic about this experience. He thought he may have found something that could make a big difference to the lives of many who still suffered. He felt that regular usage of LSD in a carefully controlled, structured setting would be beneficial for many recovering alcoholics. He did say that this method should only be attempted by individuals with an overdeveloped superego. I have known quite a few people who took a trip on LSD and they have yet to come home. 1957, Bill wrote a letter to Heard saying, I am certain that LSD experiment has helped me very much. I find myself with a heightened color perception and an appreciation of beauty almost destroyed by the years of depression. Most members of AA were strongly opposed to his experimenting with these mind-altering substances. Well, as long as he didn't drink. Bill met Abram Hoffer and learned about a potential mood stabilizing effect of niacin. Niacin is a B vitamin that helps your body turn food into energy, and it supports your nervous system, digestive system, and your skin. Bill was impressed with experiments indicating that alcoholics were given niacin had a better sobriety rate, and he began to see niacin as completing the third leg in a stool, the physical, to complement the spiritual and emotional. Most alcoholics don't eat properly, and they really beat themselves up physically and emotionally. As soon as they get off the booze and they begin eating food again, naturally their body is going to get better. Bill also believed that niacin had given him relief from depression, and he promoted the vitamin within the AA community, as well as with the National Institute of Mental Health, as a treatment for schizophrenia. Bill created a major furor in AA because he used the AA office and letterhead in his promotion. Remember Tradition 10? Well, he kind of bent that one. Broke it, really. Spiritualism was a lifelong interest for Bill, and once he had recovered, one of his letters to advisor Father Dowling suggested that while Bill was working on his book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, he felt that spirits were helping him. In particular, there was a 15th century monk named Boniface. Despite his conviction that he had evidence for the reality of spirit world, Bill chose to not share this with AA. He practiced still, his practices still created controversy with AA members. Bill and his wife continued with their unusual practices in spite of the misgivings of many AA members. In their house, they had a spook room where they would invite guests to participate in seances and use Ouija boards. One rule I always like to hold on to is keep it simple, stupid. I avoid all the wild ideas that many members of AA try. Just stick to the basics and keep it simple. Bill was described as having loved being the center of attention, but after the AA principle of anonymity became established, he refused an honorary degree from Yale University, and he refused to allow his photograph to be used on magazines, even if taken from the back. Bill is best known as a synthesizer of ideas, the man who pulled together various trends of psychology, theology, and democracy into a workable and life-saving system. Aldous Huxley called him the greatest social architect of our century. Time magazine named Bill to their top 100 list of the most important people of the 20th century. Bill's self-description was a man who, because of his bitter experiences, discovered slowly and through a conversion experience a system of behavior and a series of actions that worked for alcoholics who wanted to stop drinking. Biographer Susan Cheever wrote, "My name is Bill." Uh, Bill Wilson never held himself up as a model. He only hoped to help other people by sharing his own experience, strengths, and hopes. He insisted again and again that he was just an ordinary man. Bill bought a house that he and Lois called the Stepping Stones on an 8-acre estate in Katona, New York in 1941. He lived there with Lois until he died in 1971. After Lois died in 1988, the house was opened for tours and is now a National Registry of Historic Places. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 2012. My back hurts. Well, my back always hurts. 1989, a movie called My Name is Bill came out. Oh, no, My Name is Bill W. It was a Hallmark Hall of Fame TV movie starring James Wood as Bill W. and James Garner as Dr. Bob. Woods won an Emmy for his portrayal of Bill. I saw this movie. In fact, I had a copy of it until I loaned it to somebody and they never gave it back. Well, it was a VHS tape. They also depicted Bill W. in a 2010 TV movie based on Lois's life called When Love Is Not Enough. In 2021, Alcoholics Anonymous reported having over 120,000 registered local groups and over 1.9 million active members worldwide. Does it surprise anyone that I used to be a cab driver? You know the TV show Taxi? Well, it was way too close to reality. Some of the people I worked with, well, if y'all remember that show, yes, those were actual characters, at least the ones I worked with. On many occasions, I would get called to pick somebody up at a bar. I would pull up, and either a bartender or maybe a couple of customers would walk out supporting someone who'd had way too much to drink. A few of them actually managed to crawl, literally on their hands and knees, out the door of the bar and into the back seat of my cab. Sometimes someone would hand me a business card with an address on it, or other times it was just a piece of paper with the address scrawled on it. I took maybe 6 or 8 people to this same location. The building had a sign above the door that said Rebos House. If the customer was unable to walk, I had to get them out of the cab and into the building. I would ring the bell, and somebody would come and take this drunk off my hands. The charge was usually signed for, and no cash was ever exchanged. I wondered what the place was until one day I saw the name in the rear-view mirror. Rebos is sober, spelled backwards. Look, Cat, stop that. I'm trying to do a show here. She's playing with the other end of the mic, and later on, I did meet a few people who had been delivered there and were on the mend. They told me that anyone who got delivered would be placed in a special room where they could dry out. Once they were well enough, the folks had to take care of the next batch of drinkers. They had a 2-month obligation to do what was needed for people too far gone to take care of themselves. If you've never dealt with someone who's had way too much to drink, it is an unpleasant job. Lots of bodily fluids you just don't want to see or have on your body. I looked the place up just before doing the show, and it's still there. It's still in the same place. I was amazed. Didn't recognize the building though because, well, it's been years. I hope and pray if anyone out there listening has a suspicion that their life has become a mess, there's an inkling that the drink is taking the man or woman. There is a possibility that alcohol has become more important than anything or anyone in your life. You need to take steps to do something about it, and quick. Admitting you have a problem, even if it's just to yourself, well, that is the first step. Once you get going, it's just a matter of not giving up. Look, Cat. They real the really bizarre thing about recovery is it's so simple a caveman can do it. But it takes a huge amount of effort. You simply don't take the next drink. And ta-da, you're sober. Look, Cat. Come here. Come here. Whoa. I don't know what you want. Okay, you simply don't take the next drink and ta-da, you're sober. Okay, now I've lost my place. This is where the fellowship comes in. Don't wait until you find your recovery is in danger of dissolving. Call your local AA group and ask. Tell them that you are sick and tired of being sick and tired. Now, you're probably going to feel embarrassed admitting that you're powerless over something, but it's necessary. Life will be so much better if you do this. Family wanting a person to stay sober doesn't cut it. I've seen it where the family calls and asks the local club to get somebody sober. Make my husband sober again, or make my wife stop drinking. It doesn't work that way. It must be the alcoholic making the decision. You're wanting them to get better is like trying to cure somebody's diarrhea by thinking good thoughts. A person has to want to stop drinking on their own. I've known way too many folks who desperately needed to get off the booze. Some have been successful, but some the alcohol won. One drink is too many, and 100 is never enough. There's no such thing as controlled drinking. If you have a problem, it's stop completely. Or the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, the drink takes the man. Folks who want to sober up for their family's sake, they're destined for failure. It's just that way. The only way to succeed is to get sober and stay sober for your own benefit. Those around you are going to benefit simply because you're going to become a better person. The worst day sober is better than the best day drunk. The weird thing about society, even today, is way too many people look on alcoholics as being a bunch of degenerates. My cat just jumped off my lap, using her claws in my thigh for a launch pad. If somebody asks me if I'm an alcoholic, I will tell them the truth, but I don't advertise it much. I have actually lost a few friends because once they knew, they just couldn't get their brains around the idea that drinking is a disease and not a moral issue. The band L1011 sang a song, Thanks Bill. It was dedicated to Bill W. because the lead singer, Christian Dunn's wife, had gotten sober through AA. You can find the song on YouTube. It's not to my taste, but most music isn't. Michelle Grubert's Sober Song number 1. The song Hey Hey A refers Bill's encounter with E.B. Thatcher, which started him on the path to recovery and eventually the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now the cat's sitting there looking at the microphone like she wants to attack again. If my wife is listening, I'm coming straight home after the meeting. Would you like to join me in what is known as the men's prayer? I am a man, and I can change if I have to, I guess. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, pass it around to other people. Pass it around the people you think might need to hear it. If you feel as if I'm talking to you, I probably am. Till next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Thing.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.